What is up, NFL fans, and welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Round. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach Kevin Smith. Here we are, getting ready for OTA Phase 3 and eventually mandatory minicamp. Coach, I know you're excited for that. How's it going?
OTAs, Jeff. I can't contain myself. I'm about to burst out of the chair with excitement here. No,
Yes.
the coach in me loves this part of the process, but the fan in all of us, I think it's a little tedious.
We're grasping at straws. We'll put it that
Right.
way.
Right.
For sure. All right, let's start things off. The biggest news that happened since we spoke last, it's not the schedule, actually. I mean, we'll get to the schedule talk, but Brock Purdy, we all wondered what were the San Francisco 49ers going to do with Brock Purdy? 7th round draft pick, Mr. Irrelevant. We all know the backstory. He ends up signing an extension. He gets 5 years, $265 million, $53 million annually, $181 million guaranteed. I just want to get your knee-jerk reaction, Coach. Do you think that's a good deal for the 49ers?
I actually do. I don't know if that's a popular opinion or not, but when you sort of look at it globally, I mean, in terms of overall dollars, it's in the top 10. It's right around like what Tua got. But when you look at guaranteed money, it's eighth. So the 49ers, I think, were kind of in a tough spot here. This is a hard negotiation because here's a guy who is a 7th round pick, literally the last guy picked in the draft, but he takes you to a Super Bowl, but he's been hurt. He doesn't have the strongest arm in the world, but he's a perfect fit for Kyle Shanahan's system. You know, you got like all these pros and cons that you can put on either side of the ledger. If he was going to ask for stupid money, I think that was going to really put them in a bind because he clearly, the trend has been like, hey, the next guy up gets the biggest bag. Well, that wasn't going to work with Purdy. So I think they've kind of found a pretty good landing spot, all things considered.
This had to be a difficult negotiation because if I'm Brock Purdy's representation, I'm saying, okay, my client has gotten you to a Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Has Dak Prescott gotten the Cowboys to a Super Bowl? No. Joe Burrow got his team to a Super Bowl. They didn't win it. Look what he got. And so if I'm his agent, I'm pounding the table saying, we deserve a fair deal here because we've earned it in the short amount of time that we've been the quarterback. And I think that, like you said, it wasn't we're setting a new bar with Brock Purdy's deal with San Francisco, but it's a fair deal. I do have this caveat. The injury thing is the only thing that's concerning. Everyone that says he's a system quarterback, who the hell cares as long as he's in the right system? And it seems like he's in the right system. The 49ers have paid a lot of money to surround him with talent in the last probably 3 or 4 years. Some of that talent's now gone. Deebo Samuel is now a member of the Washington Commanders. Christian McCaffrey hopes to be healthy this year. Brandon Ayuk hopes to come back from his knee injury. Do you think that from a perspective of the 49ers being in a place to compete again, this contract gives them that not just this year, but in years to come?
Well, absolutely. If we have learned anything as Pittsburgh Steelers fans, it's that when you don't have the franchise quarterback, you're going to struggle. And the Steelers haven't exactly struggled, but they're mired in mediocrity right now until they can find their way out. And your way out in the National Football League is the elite quarterback. You could make an argument Brock Purdy's not an elite quarterback, but again, he's taken your team to the Super Bowl. And when he's been fully healthy and had a healthy roster around him, San Francisco's been one of the better teams in the league. So I think they recognize that they had to put that quarterback in place, and now they can go about restructuring the roster around him.
One thing that I want to say to all the people out there that look at these numbers and say this is absurd is just this. It's very simple. In 3 to 4 years, we're going to look back and say, wow, this is a pretty cheap deal, first and foremost. And we'll talk about the players that are set up to get paid next here in a second. But also, I think that I've become almost numb to these numbers because the salary cap is going to go up. Barring something catastrophic happening, it's going to continue to rise, which is going to give teams more space. And ultimately, they're going to spend it on players that they deem are the players that are needed to actually help them win a championship. But I want to ask you this last question before we move on. Is San Francisco closer to the Super Bowl team that we saw a couple years ago, or more to the team last year that just fell flat on their face? Where do you think they are heading into 2025?
One quick note about the money before I answer that question.
Sure.
Talked about this on my call sheet podcast on Monday. the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL right now are, counting the Purdy deal, are being paid an average annual salary of $50.5 million per season. Just by comparison, the next highest position group, the top 10 wide receivers annually are making about 29 million. So
Wow.
quarterbacks are making, what is that, 40 something percent more per year than any other position group in football. It's just the going rate. So
Yeah.
yes, it is absurd, but it's also the norm. As for the 49ers, I think that the answer lies in their ability to kind of replace some of those missing pieces. They're supposedly very high on their wide receiver room. The younger guys that they had there, Juwan Johnson, I can't remember who the other guy, the McConkey guy they drafted, I believe, or no, that's LA.
That was LA.
Yeah, whoever their other young receiver is,
Pearsall. Ricky
Pearsall. Thank you. They're high on him. So I think that they feel like they've got pieces in-house. And, the roster's aging out in some places. So how quickly do they replace those pieces will tell us that answer. They're probably in a transition year. They're not as bad as they were a year ago, probably not as good as they were a couple years ago. That's a good coaching staff. Now, the ownership group, I think some people have some issues with, but they appear to be probably headed back in the right direction.
All right. Now let's talk about the ripple effect of the Brock Purdy deal. This happens every time a player signs a big blockbuster contract. What does Brock Purdy's deal mean for the next crop of quarterbacks in line to get paid, namely CJ Stroud? CJ Stroud, the Houston Texans, should he command a bigger deal than Purdy's? If so, how much bigger? What do you think, Coach?
That's a tough question. This is very interesting because he's obviously a more high-profile guy. He was the second or third overall pick in the draft. I think he was second. He's a guy that has taken the Texans to the playoffs twice in his 2 years. They won a playoff game this past season, but he hasn't done what Purdy's done, right? Purdy's taken a team to the Super Bowl. CJ Stroud has all the indicators of a guy who's going to be a great quarterback. Phenomenal first year, maybe regressed a little bit last year, but was still pretty good. I think this year tells the story about how big his deal is. If CJ Stroud has a monster year, he's going to be in line for probably a top 3 salary in terms of the quarterbacks. And if he plays like he played last year, then that'll give the Texans some negotiating power to try to talk him down a little bit. But I would be surprised if he doesn't get a bigger deal than Purdy's, simply based upon where he was drafted and I think what his ceiling represents.
That's the thing. Is he in the right position? Is he in the right spot? Yeah, Brock Purdy, system quarterback. Yes, sure, whatever. It doesn't matter if he's in a good system. CJ Stroud, like you said, his ceiling is greater. But at the same time, I think the deal should be more akin to it, not so much like, he's the next guy to get paid big time money. I don't know if there is a quarterback. I'm trying to think of quarterbacks on rookie contracts currently that's not CJ Stroud that we're looking at that. Well, that's the next guy that's going to get paid a lot of money. Can you think of anyone else that's like waiting in line?
I mean, it's too early to tell with Jaden Daniels, but if he stays if he stays on that arc, he's going to break the bank.
They're all going to break the bank. 50 million annually. Good God.
The bank is relative in this conversation. This is not our bank, Jeff.
No, it is
a
not.
much larger bank.
Yes. All right. So let's leave the quarterbacks to the side. Let's talk about the schedule. The schedule has been released. We learned a lot. I said this jokingly the other day that we're going to be bludgeoned to death by 2 teams, and they both represented the AFC and NFC in the Super Bowl last year. If you are sick and tired of the Eagles and Chiefs, well, you might want to just hunker down for this season because we're going to get a lot of them in prime time. But, Coach, what were some of your takeaways from the schedule release last Wednesday night?
Well, you're right about the Eagles and Chiefs, but the one that I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but I was. The Cowboys are getting 6 primetime games. They're either primetime or standalone games, right? Where they're the only game in a certain spot. I mean, 6 for a team that was mediocre at best last year. Just the love of the Cowboys, a team that has not advanced past the divisional round of the playoffs in 30 years, is mind-boggling to me. But the people in the league office, they evidently do the research and those numbers move. So they schedule accordingly. I think there's that. And then speaking of numbers, it's interesting. Viewership last year was down by 2%. Now that's not a lot, but for a league that has been doing nothing but seeing its numbers go up, up, and up, they've probably a little concerned over that. So I think they front loaded the schedule with some really interesting games, a lot of divisional matchups. I mean, you're starting the year. The season kickoff is Dallas at Philly, which, I mean, those are two franchises where the fan bases hate each other. So you've got some intrigue there. And then the game down in Brazil, I think is a very attractive one because of all the marquee names, Chargers and Chiefs. I think they put a lot of big games early in the schedule because they want to generate as much intrigue as possible early on.
Bring up Brazil, and man, the international series, it keeps growing.
Yeah.
And I understand why the league's doing it. I guess my question I'm going to ask you, because you've been overseas. You were in, what was it, Germany? Was it Frankfurt, where they actually host games now as well?
Yep.
Is it actually working is my question. Meaning, is it growing the fan base overseas? Or is this just some freak show that comes to town once a year and, okay, let's go watch the big Americans hit each other in the head multiple times with big helmets and pads? I mean, what is the vibe over there? Because I got to ask myself, at what point is the league going to say, okay, I feel like we've hit the tipping point. Like, we're spending more and more time overseas. It's creating a lot of schedule snafus. Hell, the Minnesota Vikings are spending 2 weeks overseas. After they play in Ireland, they go to England to play after that. Like, that seems insane to me if it's not growing the game. So, Coach, when you were over there, what was the vibe?
When I was in Italy, it was like they'd never heard of American football. Like nobody cared, man. I mean, the weather was beautiful and everybody was like tanned and fit and like outside, and nobody cared about American football. That was not even a thing. And then you cross the Alps and you got into Austria and Germany. People loved talking about American football. I would bring it up with people. You actually saw like people wearing NFL jerseys in Germany. So I would imagine it is really kind of taking off there. I can't speak for Brazil. Brazil feels like it's an event. It comes to Brazil. It's a big event. And then it moves on and people move on. I don't know if that's true or not. That's just how it feels. But I think that there are parts of the world where it's maybe taking hold. And obviously the NFL sees that as an opening and they're trying to capitalize as best as they can.
I mean, I just keep thinking like, okay, if it's never going to be your cricket and your soccer or football, as it's called everywhere else in the world. It's never going to be that. It's not even going to be rugby, which is more of a global sport than football is. So I understand trying to plant the seeds and to get people interested. But at the same time, the NFL, in my opinion, they need to do a better job of getting games on TV overseas. Because for our Steelers podcast, when the Steelers were officially announced as having a game in Ireland, I had a Steelers representative from Ireland, and he talked about on my podcast, they don't get a lot of games. They don't get to watch a lot of games. He said, we might get a couple games a season and then the Super Bowl. So maybe the NFL needs to do a better job of talking with Sky Sports or the BBC and all these other entities and saying, what do we have to do to get our football games on more television screens to get people interested? I agree with you about Brazil. You said it feels like an event. Like, oh, here it comes. And there it is. It's awesome. And then the carnival leaves town. It's kind of what it feels like. Other than that, I'm not shocked that the NFL is trying to slowly just bleed its way into everything in the fall and winter. Now they're having 3 Christmas Day games. That seems excessive to some, but people are going to watch because they're just with their family. And I'm not going to pretend like I'm not going to watch because I am going to watch. They've taken over Black Friday. They've taken over Thanksgiving. Like, it's insane. I don't know what's going to happen when they go into an 18th game, which is only a matter of time. But any final thoughts on the schedule, Coach?
I think that the NFL knows what they're doing. They've done their research. They know what numbers work. I think they know what areas they have to hit. I think you make a really good point about expanding viewership overseas. If that's not really where they need it to be, they'll probably get there. And the streaming services may be a way. That's obviously becoming now a big part of the equation. You're going to have your first game on YouTube this year. So that will only continue to expand, probably at a cost to the viewer, which is frustrating. But the league is really good at this. And they demonstrated with this schedule release that they know how to pique intrigue and create those sexy matchups. So I expect another fabulous season ratings wise for the NFL.
All right, before we go on to talk about CD Lamb and George Pickens coexisting in Dallas, I want to do a quick aside. As of this being released Tuesday, and then also on Wednesday, the NFL owners are going to be meeting and they're going to be talking about two very big factors and rules that were postponed from the winter meetings in, I think it was February. And that is the tush push being potentially eliminated from the game, as well as reseeding in the playoffs. Coach, I want to ask your predictions. Do you think either of these pass and get changed moving forward in 2025?
No, I think they both fail. But I do believe that there is some momentum for both. But I don't think the tush push is going to pass. The last time we heard, I think they needed like 8 votes, and I don't know if they're going to find 8 votes. The playoff seeding one, I think, has a better chance at it because there seemed to be a little bit more momentum for that. That's an interesting proposal, the idea of reseeding simply by winning percentage. But I think they're both going down.
So I can't remember your take on the reseeding because I talked about this with so many people. Were you for or against it?
I liked it. I don't like the idea. I like the notion that, look, if you win your division, you should get in.
Right.
But if you're 8-9, and then you're gonna host, like last year, the Vikings went 14-3 and had to go on the road. Now they didn't go on the road to an 8-9 team, but conceivably they could have. That just feels wrong. You win a bad division like the NFC South with an 8-9 record and you get to host a playoff game. I don't know. I think home field advantage, especially in the playoffs, is a big advantage. Yeah. So I struggle with the idea that a team that could finish 8-9 could potentially host a 14-3 team.
The poor NFC South, man. They're always the example when people say you got a crappy division. Like no one brings up the AFC South. It's always
until the NFC South proves us wrong, then we're going to keep going there. Let's just say the South because we're covering our bases either way.
They've been bad for a while. All right, let's move on. Now let's go to the Cowboys. CD Lamb, he spoke to the media this past week, and he said that he and his new running mate, George Pickens, formerly of the Pittsburgh Steelers, well, they're both number 1 receivers, and that the team will treat them as such. What are the odds that the Cowboys can keep both Lamb and Pickens happy this year?
First of all, congratulations to CD Lamb for saying the thing he absolutely had to say.
He said the right thing.
Imagine if he had come out and he'd been like, no, I'm wide receiver 1. Imagine that. That would have been fantastic. But this will be easier said than done because George Pickens is in a contract year. And what does that mean? That means numbers. He needs the numbers in order to really be able to land that big second deal that he wants. And while it all sounds great that Pickens and Lamb are both wide receiver 1, you got to, there's only one football. And CD Lamb has unquestionably been the go-to guy in Dallas. So if he starts to see his targets and catches siphoned off in George Pickens' direction, is he going to be happy with that? And George Pickens, if he's not getting a number that he's comfortable with, Lord knows whatever that might be, in a contract year, that he's not going to be happy. This is a very delicate balancing act. And maybe this is one of the reasons the Steelers didn't want to deal with it, amongst the other things, that they just thought to themselves, there's no way we're going to keep Metcalf and Pickens both happy.
If you were to say to me, Jeff, give me one word to describe this situation in Dallas with Pickens and Lamb, I would say combustible. That would be the word, because I feel like it is just, it's only going to take a spark and it's going to explode. And if they're winning football games, everything will be fine. Everything will be copacetic if they're winning football games. But the moment they stop winning, or the moment that Dak Prescott starts turning the ball over at a crazy clip, or he starts missing open receivers, is when you're going to see. We've seen CD Lamb already be visibly upset with Dak Prescott on the sideline. It's already happened. Yeah. And now you add George Pickens. Now, I can't recall, and I covered every single game that guy played with the Pittsburgh Steelers, a time where he visibly went after someone like not so much to the TO to Donovan McNabb back in the day with Philly, but still he was upset. He was like a disgruntled employee is what he looked like. I don't know if he's that type of outward guy, but he's going to be upset. He's going to want his targets. He's not going to run routes fully. He's not going to block on the field. And that's why I thought, now that I think about last week when we talked about the Pickens trade, who has the most pressure on them? You brought up the new head coach because he's the one that's going to have to try and keep the peace.
Yep.
He's the one that's going to have to say, George, I understand that you didn't get the football when you were open, but I need you to block on this blocking play. And George is going to have to respond. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. I don't know. After this is kind of settled, do you still feel that that pressure is still more on him than Dak Prescott? I'm talking about Schottenheimer.
I do. On Schottenheimer and the OC, because if you're the head coach, your job is, as much as anything else, is management. You are managing the team, its personalities, creating a culture, creating a locker room environment. You're the most high profile franchise in the NFL, the Dallas Cowboys. All eyes will be on you. The spotlight will be hot. And the moment George Pickens has a meltdown or CeeDee Lamb has a meltdown and you have some kind of sideline altercation, everybody's putting the microphone in front of Brian Schottenheimer. What are you going to do about it? And he's got to have an answer, and he's got to produce that answer. And that is not easy to do.
And I think it's important to note here, CeeDee Lamb got his bag. He got paid handsomely last year. George Pickens is trying to get paid. So therefore, if he's having mediocre numbers, let's say, I don't know, 5 catches for 50 yards, and that's his average, he's not going to be happy, even if they are winning, because guess what? He's already openly said he doesn't want a new contract now because he wants to prove it. He wants to get paid big time by someone in free agency. He's not going to be, again, combustible, coach. It's this thing is ready to blow. I guarantee it. And I'll be here for it because I like watching Dallas have issues like this. Oh my gosh. All right. This is only you would bring this up in terms of topics for the United Football League.
Let's go. Let's go, Jeff. Come on.
It wrapped up its regular season on Sunday. I didn't even know it had started. And now heads to the playoffs. Does the UFL provide any intrigue for you? And will you watch its playoffs? I swear to you, I did not even know the league was going on. I did have someone ask on Twitter, like, no one is at these games. How long can this league stay alive? But you apparently watched, right?
You disappoint me, Jeff.
There's some good golf on right now, coach. I'm too busy.
You don't have St. Louis Battlehawk fever, Jeff? Come on, man.
No.
All right, the Battlehawks are actually drawing. You know, they're getting like 30,000 people at their games, which is probably more combined than all the other teams are getting at their games, because you're right. There is nobody in the stands. But the league, from what I read, is fairly well funded. And the football it's a pretty good product on the field. You got a lot of, old prior NFL players or guys trying to get back into the league. There's a decent amount of names you'd recognize, a lot of former Steelers or guys at least had a cup of coffee with the Steelers in the league. There's some very good coaches. I have a rooting interest because Anthony Becht, who's the head coach of the Battlehawks, has a house here in Ocean City, and he's been at our practices, and I've gotten to know him. And his son Rocco is the starting quarterback at Iowa State and has worked out with our players before. So I've got a personal interest, and his St. Louis team is pretty good. They're one of the 4 teams to make the playoffs. But you've got guys. Skip Holtz is the head coach of the Birmingham Stallions. Son of Lou Holtz. They've won 3. The league's been in existence for 3 years. They've won the title all 3 years. So they've built a little mini UFL dynasty there.
There you go.
It's pretty good football, and you do get a few of the guys that wind up getting NFL contracts or in the league. I would love to see it take off because while college football is the real NFL minor leagues, this could really be a developmental league. This could be a league where the Steelers sign a guy and then, or they have a guy on their practice squad and they send him to the UFL for an off season to try to improve and work on his game, et cetera, and then maybe bring him back. I'd love to see that happen.
That is what I was going to say. If you want to draw interest, and if the UFL is struggling and the NFL is smart, they will go to the UFL and say, listen, we want to buy the UFL. And we want to have a system in place where teams, after training camp has wrapped up, they can delegate certain players to certain teams so that they can stay within their organization, but it's by proxy of a minor league system. It would be the same as in the NHL. You have different layers of minor leagues. So like for the Pittsburgh Penguins, you have the Wheeling Nailers, that's their ECHL affiliate. Then you have the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Baby Penguins, and then you go to the NHL. That's AHL to NHL. That would be a great way. I would be watching, Coach, because now if I know that the Battlehawks, because that's the name that you said, they have 10 players from the Pittsburgh Steelers who were relegated to that league to get better before they return to the Steelers for training camp, I would watch. I would be intrigued. Okay, they drafted this guy in the 6th round. He didn't make the roster last year, but they kept him in the organization because they think he can develop. I want to see how he's doing. Now, all of a sudden, I'm following. I don't know why the NFL seems resistant to want to do that. And maybe the UFL says they don't want their help, but the NFL, would pump it up and it would be a better product. It would get more visibility. And if you tied it with teams, I think it would be a win-win, wouldn't you? Don't you agree?
Yeah. The NFL did it 20 some years ago with NFL Europe.
Yep.
Guys like Kurt Warner and James Harrison got relegated to NFL Europe teams. And I think it would be a great idea. There are every fan base in the league will find guys that they recognize. Steelers fans will recognize Hakeem Butler, Anthony McFarland. Those guys are playing in the league. There's a safety they drafted about 4 years ago. I can't remember who it is, but and yes, I like the idea of what you're talking about there. Raise the intrigue. Football is wonderful at keeping itself relevant 365, and this is another opportunity.
Because, you would be talking about now in the lull period of the NFL calendar, you would have this to watch. I think it'd be a win-win. Anyways.
We do have it to watch, Jeff. It's right here.
That's true. It doesn't trump the PGA Championship for me, unfortunately. All right, let's finish up with the player profile. You want to talk about Ben Johnson, first-year head coach of the Chicago Bears. I'll let you start.
Yeah, I bring up Ben Johnson because interesting news came out this week. There's a book being published about quarterbacks. It'll be coming out shortly. And there's a chapter in there about Caleb Williams and his development. And in that chapter, when interviewed, Caleb Williams talked about his experience in Chicago last year and how he was never instructed how to watch film or what to watch. And that his instruction in general as a quarterback, the development of him as a rookie, was unbelievably lacking in some basic areas in terms of just relevant instruction. And it was a really damning report on the Shane Waldron, Matt Eberflus regime in Chicago last year. And it just, to me, underscores the dysfunction of the Bears. And I bring up Ben Johnson because here's a guy coming off of an unbelievably successful run in Detroit. He was the most sought after head coaching candidate on the market this offseason. The Bears land him. And it feels like they've loaded up on talent. It feels like the Bears have a pretty good roster. But I guess my question is this: can Ben Johnson clear that culture hurdle that has just hamstrung the Bears forever? The Caleb Williams report just underscored how dysfunctional I think it is or has been in Chicago. And now Ben Johnson's got that task of trying to get it right. It'll be fascinating to watch that unfold.
Yeah, I saw that report, and I saw the people talking about the film study and stuff like that. And how Coach, you're a football coach. When you're in high school, do you teach the kids how to watch film? Do you track? So how does that look for you? Like, how do you teach them to properly break down film? And I know with Huddle and different services like that now, like, it is unbelievably easier than it was probably when you started coaching. Actually, I know it was, but still. How do you go about teaching a young adult? Here's how you break down film.
All right. So let's say we're playing a team in the upcoming week that runs predominantly cover 3. So Huddle is so amazing. You can just take all of the film you have on that opponent and you can filter in cover 3. Show me all the clips where they're in cover 3. And it'll generate a playlist for you. Maybe it'll have 45 clips of them in cover 3. And then I just label that and I send it out to, let's say, our quarterbacks and our wide receivers. And I say, hey, here's all the clips of these guys in cover 3. Let's pay attention to A, B, and C, right? When they're in cover 3, the safety's going to line up here. They're going to do this, that, and the other. Study all that stuff. And then we're going to meet before practice on Monday and we're going to talk about this list. And then I've got the ability as a manager of our Huddle account to see who's watched the clips and for how long. So if it's a 7-minute long playlist and our starting quarterbacks watched it for 28 seconds, I'm going to see that. And you can't cheat it. So I know if you've watched the whole thing or not. It's a great way to teach, and it's a great way to instruct and also to monitor, like, what are they doing? So there's a million ways you could use it. And as an NFL program, as an NFL franchise, I would think you wouldn't just turn over the iPad to the quarterback and be like, here you go, watch some film. Like, you need to tell them exactly what they're supposed to be looking at and what is the outcome of that, right? Here's what they're doing, and here's what we're going to do as a result. That's elementary. We're doing it in high school.
Hey, Johnny Manziel, I think he set the record when he watched 0 minutes of film. They looked at his iPad, like, did he even turn it on?
Yeah. And we saw how that worked out for him.
Yeah. Well, Kyler Murray, remember in his contract that he got, how he couldn't play video games for a certain amount of time or something? Like,
yeah.
I feel like you should have done your homework.
Your natural ability will only get you so far. I don't care, even at a world-class level. So
Ben Johnson, it's going to be an interesting foray here with the Chicago Bears and what he's going to be able to do. And it's either going to be like, wow, the Bears are a really tough organization to just ever see success, or it's going to be, wow, that era was awful. And so we'll see how it goes. And Ryan Pohl's job might be on the line because he's the next to go if it doesn't work out well. Yeah. So, all right, Coach, I want to give you an opportunity to plug your Call Sheet Daily podcast. Go and do that now.
Yeah, I got some great shows this week. Wednesdays, our Whiteboard Wednesday segment, we're talking about problem solving. Not really talking about scheme this week. We're talking about crisis management as a coach. Thursday is our state of the franchise. We're profiling the 49ers this week. And, Rob Guerrera from FFSN is going to be on the show with me. The Stats on Fire podcast. That'll be a great conversation with Rob. Friday's our hot route segment with Pez from Pez's Picks, where we talk about football and life. We're having a blast doing that one. So, yeah, we got some good shows on tap here.
All right. Love to see it. I'll check them out for sure. In the meantime, folks, you can check out our work with the Steel Curtain Network. If you want to check out our Steelers coverage, just go wherever you get your podcasts. Go to Steel Curtain Network or steelcurtainnetwork.com. Coach, thanks for your time. We'll talk next week on another NFL Whip Round.